Okay, so we begin with this.
Yes.
I'm with Sanjana, and we are in Savitri, Book 7, the Book of Yoga, Canto 3, the entry into the inner countries. Please begin.
At first, out of the busy hum of mind, as if from a loud, thronged market into a cave, by an inward moment's magic she had come. As if from a loud, yes,
thronged market into a cave by an inward moment's magic. Okay.
got it.
Again. Read it
Should
again.
I continue? Okay. At first, out of the busy hum of mind, as if from a loud thronged market into a cave, by an inward moment's magic she had come.
So very clear. From
Yes.
getting out of this hum of mind, sort of like coming from a market into a cave, and she had come there.
Mm.
Okay.
A stark, hushed emptiness became herself, her mind unvisited by the voice of thought, stared at a
mind unvisited by the voice of thought.
her mind, unvisited by the voice of thought, stared at a void deeps, dumb infinity.
Good. We have to remember rhythm. Always remember rhythm is the heart of poetry. So she has now become a stark, hushed emptiness, and her mind is no longer visited by the voice of thought. And so she's staring at this void, deeps, dumb infinity. Carry on.
Her heights receded, her depths behind her closed. All fled away from her and left her blank.
Yeah, I would have not been so all fled away from her, or all fled away from her and left
her blank. Got it.
So her heights have now receded, her depths have closed behind her, and everything's fled away from her. And so she's blank now.
But when she came back to herself of thought, once more she was a human thing on earth, a lump of matter, a house of closed sight, a mind compelled to think out ignorance, a life force pressed into a camp of works, and the material world her limiting field.
So this is very, very interesting. This, you see, when she comes back, because she's in a human body, back to herself of thought, and now she is again this human thing on earth. And Sri Aurobindo is very strong, huh? A lump of matter, a house of closed sight, a mind compelled to think out ignorance. Look at all the A's: a lump, a mind, a life force. A life force pressed into a camp of works, as we all are in life. And the material world, our limiting field.
Amazed like one unknowing, she sought her way out of the tangle of man's ignorant past that took the surface person for the soul.
Wow. So she is amazed, like someone who doesn't know anything, and she's now seeking her way out of this tangle of the ignorant past of man. Because man always takes the surface person for the soul, unless he's highly evolved. Now the voice speaks.
Then a voice spoke that dwelt on secret heights.
Now change your
For
voice.
man thou seekst, not for thyself alone. Only if God assumes the human mind and puts on mortal ignorance for his cloak, and makes himself the dwarf with triple stride, can he help man to grow into the God.
So it's very important
Yeah.
that the divine has to assume the human mind, even Mother and Sri Aurobindo,
Yes.
and put on mortal ignorance. But it's just for his cloak, it's just the dress. But then he has to make himself the dwarf with triple stride. And of course, Purani tells us the dwarf here brings to our mind the Vamana, the divine dwarf, an incarnation of Vishnu, who measured the three worlds, the material, the vital, and the mental, in his three steps. Nalini says, from Indian mythology, an incarnation of Vishnu. So one has to become an incarnation of Vishnu if God is going to assume the human mind and help man to grow into the God. And now he's going to tell us what this greater being, we can call him an avatar in this instance. So carry on.
Amazed like one unknowing, sorry.
As man disguised.
As man disguised the cosmic greatness, as man disguised, the cosmic greatness works and finds the mystic inaccessible gate and opens the immortal's golden door.
Very clear, very clear. This cosmic greatness is just disguised as man because it's taken a human body. But it's still the cosmic greatness. It's God. And finds the inaccessible mystic gate and even opens the immortal's golden door. Now, very important.
Man, human follows in God's human steps.
Good, well read. So man has to follow in God's human steps. Sri Aurobindo is always so clear. He'll tell us in one way how man can grow into the God. He'll tell us in another that the cosmic greatness works disguised as man. And then he says man, comma, human, comma, follows in God's human steps. See how clear from line to line he's giving us that difference. So important.
Accepting his darkness, thou must bring to him light. Accepting his sorrow, thou must bring to him bliss. In matter's body, find thy heaven born soul.
Now, this is the voice still talking to Savitri. And so you have to accept man's darkness, the God says, in order to bring him light. And you have to accept his sorrow so you can bring him bliss. And in the body of matter, telling Savitri, find thy heaven born soul. So in matter, she has to find it. And now what is she going to do?
Then Savitri surged out of her body's wall and stood a little span outside herself and looked into her subtle being's depths, and in its heart, as in a lotus bud, divined her secret and mysterious soul.
Now you're getting into the rhythm. Very good. So Savitri then has to surge. Look at that surge. Huge. We see the ocean surge, rise up, and she surges out of her body's wall, the human form. And what does she do? This is the witness self, and stood a little span outside herself and looked into her subtle being's depths. The subtle being is very, very important. Very important. So here's something from the synthesis. The terminology of yoga recognizes, besides the status of our physical and vital being, termed the gross body, and doubly composed of the food sheath and the vital vehicle, beside the status of our mental being, termed the subtle body, and singly composed of the mind sheath or mental vehicle, a third supreme and divine status of supramental being, termed the causal body, and composed of a fourth and a fifth vehicle, which are described as those of knowledge and bliss. Sat Chit Ananda. Interesting. So she looks into her subtle being steps, and she sees in that subtle being something like a lotus bud. Divined means here to perceive by intuition or insight when you divine something.
Okay.
Divined her secret and mysterious soul.
At the dim portal of her inner life that bars out.
I have the inner life.
Oh.
Not her.
Sorry. At the dim portal of the inner life that bars out from our depths the body's mind and all that lives but by the body's breath, she knocked and pressed against the ebony gate.
Yeah, could that be a little bit stronger, that last line? She knocked.
She knocked and pressed against the ebony gate.
See how important these inflections are.
Is ebony the color? Is it white or is it black?
Black.
Black.
The ebony keys on the piano. The black.
Okay. Black keys. Yeah.
Yes, very black.
So, what is this ebony gate?
Well, we're going to see what it is because Sri Aurobindo is going to tell us in the next lines. So, the living portal, the portal is what? The gate. We can call it a gate. The living portal groaned. Carry on.
The living portal groaned with sullen hinge. Heavily reluctant, it complained, inert, against the tyranny of the spirit's touch. Formidable.
It's complaining now. It doesn't want her to push against this portal of the inner life. It doesn't want that at all. So it's groaning with a sullen, gloomy, dismal, somber hinge. And it's very reluctant. It complained inert because it can't move or anything. It's inactive or sluggish, we could say, by nature or habit, against the tyranny of the spirit's touch. So this is very interesting because now it's going to speak to her.
A formidable voice cried from within, "Back, creature of earth, lest tortured and torn thou die."
Wow, very powerful. Mother tells the story of meeting that huge serpent.
Hmm.
You remember?
Yes.
And she
But
wanted to go through, and he said, "You cannot pass until
yes.
you have cleared the sex impulse from the world."
My
Well, I
God.
had not done that, so she couldn't pass.
Hmm.
Okay, so this formidable voice of awesome strength here, cried from within, "Back, creature of earth, lest tortured and torn thou die."
Lest, what is lest?
Lest, unless.
Unless, okay. So it's saying back off unless you want to be tortured and torn and
Yeah,
die.
yes, a
A,
dreadful.
a dreadful murmur rose like a dim sea. The serpent of the threshold hissing rose. A fatal guardianhood with monstrous coils. The hounds of darkness growled with jaws agape, and trolls and gnomes and goblins scowled and stared, and wild beast roarings thrilled the blood with fear, and menace muttered in a dangerous tongue.
A lot to go through here.
Mhm.
So this murmur rises, and the serpent of the threshold. Alok says the serpent power that lies at the base of matter. It guards the entry into inner worlds. Madhav Pandit. The serpent is the guardian power of the interior. And Amal. Many obstructing agencies have to be met when one tries to break free from outwardness and plunge into the depths of one being. The very first of these obstructions is a poisonous serpent, like a cobra, a terrifying front with a long supporting background of fearful forces. How wonderful to have all of their definitions.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Now,
what happens? Is it like you see it in a dream, or like how does this, how is it an inner experience, like a very living experience of facing this, or what is it?
yes, it is.
Or is it a rise of like some kind of like an extreme hatred or anger
Yes,
within the
and
this?
it can also, this is very mystical, of course, because we also have to face this. We have to face when we go within and when we try to break free from outwardness and plunge into the very depths of our being. This happens. Not always. It doesn't always happen like a poisonous serpent, but it can be a terrifying experience. And I can say personally that attempting to rise into the spiritual dimensions of consciousness is a huge leap. We can do it by prayer, by meditation, by sincere aspiration, constantly. And even then, it takes a long, long time. So, the hounds of darkness, we also call them the hounds of Baal. They're the hounds of darkness. They're growling with their jaws open. Now I have a couple of things that's important. First of all, Alok. The hounds of darkness, the powers and beings of darkness, werewolves that tear away the light and bliss and peace that dwells within man's depths. or has been gathered through sadhana. Very important. And now a long quote from Jumur. These are not just images, and not just there for effect. They represent certain movements in the being, certain forces that are universal, independent. It is not one man who suffers. Certain level of existence, these experiences are universal. There are forces that are at work on all levels, forces that really prey on man, really, in that sense. You can't seem to escape from them. One is semi conscious or lives as we do in an in between state, not knowing exactly which is your direction. You have this force really at your heels, pushing you sometimes into suffering, into death. You feel that you have been deserted. Sometimes there is a notion of karma. At other times, you feel that it is some force that is pushing you. These are universal forces in the field of life, in the field of the subconscious, in the unconsciousness. On these levels, they are not images, they are powers which Sri Aurobindo has given a certain shape, form, image. Teaches us a lot, doesn't it? These people who have had openings have really had them. This couldn't be mentally imagined, these words. So the hounds of darkness growled with open jaws agape. And trolls are usually supernatural creatures of the Scandinavian folklore. They can be friendly, they can be mischievous, or they can be giants. They live in caves, in the hills, under bridges, especially under bridges. A gnome is a fabled race of dwarf-like creatures who live underground and guard treasure hoards. And a goblin is a grotesque sprite or elf that is mischievous or malicious towards people. In one line, Sri Aurobindo gives us all of that. Trolls and gnomes and goblins scowled and stared.
I thought gnomes were innocent little creatures, though. I guess they're the light gnomes as well.
No, well, they're not necessarily evil creatures, but they are dwarf-like. They live underground, and they guard the treasure hoards. We had that in another place in the beginning where the shekels, remember the line about the shekels are being guided, the riches of the cave. Sri Aurobindo uses that. The riches of the cave are guarded by these beings.
Yes.
And then these wild beasts, oh my gosh, it's already 6. So,
no worries.
But remember that we'll read it next time.
Thank you. Namaste.